almost via a classified ad, and then you have 7 months of training. What did you do during that?
Well, there was a classified ad that said, learn to be a pro wrestler at the 7th Street Gym in downtown Minneapolis, and I answered the ad, and I went down and met Eddie Sharkey, who had remembered as a kid had been a wrestler, very good one, and he trained me for 7 months.
How many miles did you put on your car during those first couple of years?
Well, I always like to tell the story. The first new car I bought was a 1975 Mercury Cougar, and this included carpooling. In 2 years, it had 128,000 miles on it. And that included carpooling.
That's amazing. I want to run through a few close calls that you had while wrestling and get you to recall the story. The first one being the Eugene, Oregon fan.
Oh, I was involved in a match in Eugene, and it got a little wild, and when I was leaving, I was a villain or a heel, and the police always escort you back to the dressing room, and a fight broke out at ringside, so I made the mistake of dismissing my security, figuring I was okay. Go ahead, take care of the fight, I'm fine. Well, I still had a ways to go to get to the dressing room, and in the interim, a guy came around the corner, pulled out a huge hunting knife, unsheathed it, and basically said, I'm going to kill you. And he was coming at me. And by reading his eyes, I knew he was dead serious, so I immediately thought, well, when a guy has a knife, you're probably going to have to sacrifice something to the knife in which to get him. So I was at that determinating period when all of a sudden, out of the stands, this guy dropped behind him, grabbed him, spun him around, and had him cuffed in an instant.
Wow.
It turned out it was a plainclothes cop, happened to take his kids to the matches and happened to be looking down.
It was something that turned into a really serious situation. I know you didn't think it would be initially. The pulmonary embolism.
Well, it was initially because I didn't know what it was. And I wrestled with it for 3 nights. And I thought it was winter time, or I had come from Minnesota and I was wrestling Phoenix. And I had no breath. I was running out of energy. And at first I thought, well, maybe it's Arizona. I'm not used to it. It's hot here. And then the next night I wrestled Oakland, same thing. And got to San Diego and I hung with John Studd. And John was going to the gym and I just said, John, I'm not feeling good. I'm going to take a nap. And I took a nap. I woke up and I had a bed. The whole bed was wet and sweat. I couldn't even take a deep breath, so I went out to my rental car. I drove to the emergency room at the Sharp Cabrillo Hospital. There was a former Marine there. He set me down in a chair, and he said, I don't want you to move. And I said, what do you think I have? He said, I think you got pulmonary emboli, blood clots in the lungs. You're too good of an athlete. We did an arterial blood draw, and I was only at like 72% oxygen. He said, an athlete like you should be running 95 to 98% oxygen. And then they came in and do an angiogram and found out I had massive blood clots in my lungs, and I couldn't wrestle for 6 months.
How did you handle that period?
Recouping. Looking into the mirror, wondering, what are you going to do now? You've been wrestling for 10 to 12 years. It's the only thing you know how to do. You can't put that on a resume and go to General Mills and think you're going to get a job. So I faced the dilemma that all pro athletes have to face. I faced it a little prematurely. What do you do when it's all over? And then many times out of bad comes good. And that was the case in my case was during my convalescing. Vince called one day and said, Jesse, you're good enough to get around now. You can't get back in the ring. He said, do you think you could do color commentating, be an announcer? He said, I want to try something new. And I said, you want to announce? He said, there's never been a bad guy on the mic, someone who sides with the villains. And it was Vince's idea. He said, I said, I know I could do it. So when I went there to do my first one, he gave me the greatest march you could get. Before I went out to broadcast, he said, here's your mindset. If you believe it, it's true. Can you imagine being told that? If you believe it, it's true. In other words, he's giving me carte blanche to say anything I want. And the greatest job in the world, when I graduated then and went to the #1 team with Vince and I, Saturday night main event where we still hold the record for the largest points ever. We beat Madonna when she was on Saturday Night Live, killed her. We got a 34 share.
Wow.
Imagine that, 34. 1 out of 3 TVs in the U.S.
Right.
was watching Saturday Night Live. Well, imagine having a job where you can totally ridicule your boss on national television. He pays you to do it and loves it.